Why is Gen Z so hard to work with? This is a question I hear from so many managers, whether it's in government, in corporate boardrooms, in team meetings. And look, I get it. As someone who's been a manager and in an executive role, I've watched this play out in different organizations around me. Maybe you've brought in talented young people, they're joining your team with such promise. They could be top graduates even, brilliant minds. But then you see a shift. Maybe they go quiet in meetings or they push back on feedback and they end up leaving for new jobs just when they were getting good. Now, I haven't been one to necessarily shy away from giving clear feedback and having direct conversations about performance. And I'm also pretty lucky, I've been on some great teams. But I've also watched other teams and other managers shy away from those conversations. They'd avoid the hard discussions, leave issues unaddressed, and then pass frustrated employees on to the next manager to deal with. And I realized the question isn't really about Gen Z being difficult. It's about a massive communication breakdown that nobody's talking about. Handled by the Y variable. This is the show where we bridge generations in the workplace with strategy that sticks. Each week, we'll tackle the real workplace challenges between managers and early career talent. No buzzwords, no generic advice, just practical frameworks that actually work for both sides. I'm Yahima, and I'm here because I've been on both sides of this generational divide. Here's what I've learned from chairing scholarship selection committees and mentoring many young professionals, and yes, making my own mistakes as both an employee and a manager. The question isn't really, why is Gen Z so hard to work with? The question is, why are we speaking completely different professional languages and pretending that we're not? Because here's what's actually happening. So managers think they're being clear, supportive, professional. But Gen Z employees, many of them think that they're being dismissed or micromanaged or set up to fail. Same workplace, same good intentions, but completely different realities. And the cost? Well, organizations are losing talent that they spent months recruiting. You have young professionals who are walking away from roles that they wanted to succeed in. And teams are fracturing over miscommunications that could have been prevented. This isn't just a generational issue. It's about workplace communication styles that have evolved faster in many ways and our ability to bridge them. It's also about how our digital first, often remote workplaces have also fundamentally changed how we exchange information. And if we don't address it, we're not just going to lose Gen Z talent, but we're also going to erode trust, momentum, and culture across entire organizations. So let me show you an example of how this might play out. Imagine there's Sarah. She's a Gen Z marketing coordinator, and she's 3 months into her first professional job. Her manager is David, and he has 15 years of experience, and he genuinely wants her to succeed. He's trying to be a good manager. So here's the situation. Sarah submits her first campaign proposal. David reviews it and he says, look, this is a good start. Let's refine it. Let's see how we can make it stronger. What David meant, what his intention here was to say, look, I see potential here. I'm invested in helping you to develop this idea, and we can work collaboratively to improve this. He might also be trying to empower her, or he could just be really strapped for time. He's a manager after all. But Sarah heard something different. She heard, this isn't good enough. I don't know what stronger means. He's not giving me the information I need to succeed, but he's expecting me to figure it out. Sarah maybe grew up in a different sort of environment from David. She grew up with really clear rubrics and direct feedback in school, and this ambiguity almost feels like a setup to her. So 2 weeks goes by, Sarah submits a revised version, and it barely addresses David's concerns. David is frustrated. He thinks Sarah isn't taking his feedback seriously. And Sarah is frustrated too, because she thinks David is being deliberately vague. The real issue? David communicates by implying meaning, and he expects context to fill the gaps. But Sarah, she needs explicit instruction and really clear success metrics. Neither is wrong, neither is being difficult. They're just speaking different professional languages. But let's not pretend that this is a level playing field. Sarah may not feel safe enough to ask for clarity. And David, he may not realize that his tone carries more weight than he thinks, especially if, let's say, this is a digital conversation, and those nonverbal cues could be missing. Translation only works when trust and safety are present. In my work with organizations, I call this the translation gap. It's a pattern of missed meanings that show up in 3 general ways. The first is delivery mismatch, the second is definition differences, and the third is default assumptions. So let's break down delivery mismatch. David used implied feedback. He said, let's make this stronger. But Sarah needs explicit feedback. Maybe she needed to hear, look, for this campaign, the messaging should target our Gen Z segment more clearly. Let's try 3 campaign variations with different calls to action. Now for definition differences. David defines collaboration as, well, I give you direction, you iterate, maybe we refine this together. Sarah defines it as co-creating from the beginning and actually getting that alignment before she takes any steps forward. The third is default assumptions. Now, David's default, he feels that if someone needs clarification, they're going to ask. He might assume this because that's how he learned to show initiative. But Sarah's default is, if questions are welcome, they'll say so. She might be hesitant to ask without explicit permission because she's worried about looking like she's incompetent. Now, the breakthrough happens when we stop assuming others share our defaults or our typical course of action, what we're used to doing, and instead start naming what we mean out loud. And this is really crucial, especially if communication doesn't happen at the same time. Maybe it's in text or a Slack thread. And those nonverbal cues, if they're not present, it can make it even more difficult to understand. So here's what you can do today. This is what I recommend that you try starting this week. For managers, translate your feedback. Swap what's vague for something that's specific. Instead of, well, this needs work, try, here are 3 things to revise, and here's why they matter, and then give a few examples. Signal openness and your intention. You can say something like, let me know where I can clarify. I expect questions, and my goal here is to empower you, not to leave you guessing. And proactively set context. You can say, look, my goal here isn't to micromanage, but I want to ensure we're aligned, and please ask if anything is unclear. And look, if you're Gen Z or early career, you have responsibility too. You need to ask directly and clarify for alignment. Ask, what does success look like here? Should I do a draft and check in before I finalize? Take initiative so that you know what the expectations are. Frame really clear questions. Say, look, can we map this project out together? Be proactive in your approach. Take initiative. And pay attention to any trends in terms of feedback, not just the isolated moments. What are the things that you're hearing consistently? And let's remember, good intentions are a start, but it's clarity that builds trust. The goal isn't to guess what someone needs. It's to ask. And I just want to share this. Sometimes the boldest thing you can do in the workplace is to listen. Listen for what's not being said. Listen for the assumptions under the surface. Listen for the moment a relationship starts to shift, and address it before it breaks. This work isn't about fixing people. It's about helping people understand each other clearly enough to stay in the work long enough to grow. It's about recognizing that the way we've always done things, it might not align with how new generations are wired or how our tools now force us to communicate. Gen Z isn't automatically hard to work with. They're just waiting for someone to speak their professional language. And managers aren't automatically out of touch. They're using a framework that used to work, but it may no longer fit the modern and diverse workforce. The goal here isn't to change who you are. It's to listen well enough to translate who you are into something that lands. And if we don't, these translation gaps become retention gaps. They become morale issues, culture issues, and eventually they become turnover and burnout on both sides. If this shifted how you think about workplace communication, please hit subscribe and share this with someone navigating that same tension. And if you've ever wondered how to translate breakdowns into productive conversations, I've put together a free resource called the Workplace Translation Starter Guide. It walks you through the exact questions, phrases, and clarifying steps managers and Gen Z professionals can use to make sure that your message really lands the way you intended. You can grab it in the show notes or description box below if you're watching this on YouTube. Remember, the gap isn't the problem. It's how we handle it. This is handled by the Y variable, and we're just getting started. Let's handle it together.